Hey everyone, this video is a follow-up to my one about how camera lenses affect your perspective drawings, which I recommend you watch first before this one. I got a comment from JC who asked about how focal lengths manifest in one-point perspective in terms of vanishing points, so I wanted to make this video to go over more practical applications for your own drawings and art. A lot of the information I'm going to go over today is from Scott Robertson's How to Draw, which I highly recommend going through if you're also wanting to learn more about perspective. Some of the terminology in that book can be quite dense, so I hope my video can distill things down to make it a little bit easier to understand. Whenever we're drawing in perspective, we want the art that we create to be believable and create the illusion of 3D space. So I want you to take a look at this 3D scene, and within this frame, all of the elements look pretty normal to us. But as soon as I start pulling the camera back, check out what happens to everything outside of this range. They become extremely distorted even though they're still normal, but it's just the effect of perspective that makes them appear so weird to us. But if I zoom back in and only use this frame here as my canvas or paper, or really whatever I'm making my art on, we're not going to see those distorted objects because we've cropped them out of our scene. To answer JC's question, changing the focal lengths on one-point perspective is going to look something like this. I have a 360-degree image here of New York City, and this scene is one-point perspective. So if I start zooming in, I'm really changing my focal length, but notice how the lines around it start to feel a little bit more natural? So something that I really want to illustrate is that as humans, we don't see the world in a flat picture plane. Whenever we draw on a canvas or sketchbook, we're just creating an illusion, but we interpret the world more like a sphere. So check out this other 360-degree photo. If I zoom all the way back, I'm again changing my focal length into something of a wide-angle lens. But just like I showed you in Blender, everything outside of the center is going to become distorted. So notice, I'm going to start panning my camera around, and you'll see that everything in this middle section here goes back into looking normal. So this hill looks normal here, but the person on the left of it looks really distorted, and then if I move the camera, the person looks fine, but now the hill starts to look weird. As artists, what we want to do is find that crop, so we know that our drawings are not prone to distortion. But remember, since our vision is like a sphere, we can't use a rectangular crop, and instead, we're going to use something called the cone of vision. The cone of vision is essentially a tool that we use to make sure all of our drawings stay inside this acceptable area so that everything looks normal. And it's very common to want the cone of vision to envelop your entire canvas, so you know your drawing isn't going to be distorted. In its simplest terms, all the cone of vision is doing is determining where we place our vanishing points in relation to our picture plane. In Scott Robertson's How to Draw, he recommends using a cone of vision that is 60 degrees wide for our drawings, and in camera terms, this is roughly equivalent to about having a 35mm focal length. So why is it exactly 60 degrees? It's because it creates an acceptable amount of distortion for us, not too much and not too little. In my previous video, you'll notice that I said that 50mm or about 46 degrees is equivalent to how the human eye perceives things. Well, since we're creating art, we can deviate slightly from this, and this is why Scott Robertson recommends using 60 degrees just because it widens out a peripheral a little bit, but that's where we get that number from. Okay, so enough talking, we're gonna learn how to draw the cone of vision together, and then hopefully it'll sink in a little bit more. And the two tools you're going to see me use are Lazy Nezumi, which I use for all of my straight lines and ellipses. It's essentially just like having a Photoshop ruler. And the other one is Perspective Tools V2, which is going to help me create perspective grids later on. So the first step is I'm going to start off with my picture plane, which is 16:9 in aspect ratio, and my entire drawing is going to take place within this thing. Next, I'm going to draw my horizon line through the middle of my picture plane. But where you put the horizon line really doesn't matter. This can all change, but I'm just going to keep things as simple as possible for this video. After this, I'm going to mark something called the center vision point. It's not a vanishing point, and it doesn't need to actually be in the center of your picture plane, but it does indicate where I'm going to be directing my attention and looking at. And again, for this video, I'm going to put it directly in the middle of the frame to keep things simple. Since anything outside of my cone of vision is going to be distorted, I'm going to draw a circle emanating from the middle of the center vision point and fully encompass my picture plane. So once again, the cone of vision doesn't always need to fully cover the picture plane. For instance, it could cover half or only a portion, but just remember anything outside of this is going to be distorted. So since I don't want that, I'm going to use my cone of vision to cover the entire picture plane. The next step I'm going to do is drop a line down from my center vision point, but I'm not entirely sure how long this needs to be until after the next step, so you can just estimate how long you want to draw down. Where our circle intersects on the horizon line is important. Because I want my cone of vision to be 60 degrees, I'm now going to take a protractor and align it to the center vision point line. Now all I have to do is measure 60 degrees from where the cone of vision intersects the horizon and draw these two lines back to the center vision point. Remember, 10, 20, 30 degrees to the right, and then 10, 20, 30 degrees to the left, add up to 60 degrees. So now we have this point here on our center vision point line, and this is called our station point. So think of this as where our camera is positioned in relation to our subject, kind of like this in Blender. So you can see how far away these cameras are from the subject. All of these steps so far are so that we can finally determine where we can place our vanishing points. If I wanted to draw an object with 90-degree angles like a cube, then I will need to place two lines from our station point that add up to 90 degrees. For this demonstration, I'm going to go for 45 degrees on this side, and then 45 degrees on the right side. But it could really be anything like 60-30, 70-20, as long as it adds up to 90 degrees. So after all of that, I'm going to extend these lines up to the horizon point, and then these are finally our vanishing points within the 60-degree cone of vision. So you might need to watch this section a couple of times for it to really sink in, and if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll get back to you. So now we can finally draw all over our picture plane, and this is going to be exactly 35 millimeters or about 60 degrees in a cone of vision. Once you understand how to actually do this, we can simply take that logic and then apply it to other degrees and find their corresponding focal lengths. So right now I'm going to use this handy focal length chart and find a telephoto lens. And for this demonstration, I'm going to pick 135 millimeters, which is equivalent to 18 degrees. I'm going to keep everything exactly the same. So how big our picture plane is, the horizon line in relation to it, where our center vanishing point is located, and how big the cone of vision is in relation to the picture plane. All of that's going to stay exactly the same. The only thing that's going to change is the angle in relation to the station point, which is now going to be 18 degrees instead of 60. When I plug in those numbers and measure those angles, look how far down the station point now becomes compared to our 60-degree example. To hammer this point home, I'm even going to use the exact same degrees to find my vanishing points. So 45 degrees to the left and 45 degrees to the right. The difference is that these lines have to really travel far to make it back to our horizon, and redrawing our cubes is going to yield results like this, which is just like a telephoto lens. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing once again for a wide angle lens. And if we compare all of our drawings, we're going to have something kind of like this. By the way, you can absolutely have vanishing points within the picture plane. That's because the rate of convergence for wide angle will cause distortions, which is why Scott Robertson advises to use 60 degrees for most drawings. But I hope you can see how wide angle is actually used now that we have set it all up. In Blender, I set up the exact same scene 3 times using the exact same focal lengths, and here are the renders versus my drawings. So here is also a useful tip for measuring angles. The first step is to refer to the focal length chart and then pick a lens. And in this case, just for an example, I'm going to pick a medium telephoto at 85 millimeters. The second step is to find its corresponding degree, and in this case, ours is 28 degrees. Then you want to divide that degree by 2, which will leave us with 14. The next step is to minus that degree by 90, which will give us negative 76. And then plus that degree by 90, which will give us 104. So having these two angles, we're going to measure that on the protractor and then finally draw our angle. And then from there, we can finally set the rest of our cone of vision stuff up and get our vanishing points to begin drawing. All right, so now that you know all of this stuff, how much of it are you actually going to use in your work? Like always, the answer is up to you and your own preferred workflow, but as Dr. Draw said, at the end of the day, we're artists and not engineers. So it's important to know how and why these things work, but personally, I don't really set up grids like this every single time I draw. The broadest takeaway I can give you is, if your vanishing points are closer together, then they're going to be a wide angle lens, but if they're really far apart, then it's more like a telephoto lens. After all, it's just an approximation unless you want to go really technical like the cone of vision examples I showed you, but once you start building up the skills, you'll begin to feel this intuitively. And after all, what you really want to be focusing on is actual art and creation and less about the technical aspects of your stories and projects. I'm also going to link further videos on the station point and another explanation of the cone of vision to help you understand these concepts. These are all linked down in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I hope this one helped you out. Until next time everyone, take care and stay safe.